A Japanese man dressed in wildly colorful pajamas suddenly wakes up inside a white, featureless room with no doors, no windows, and no visible ceiling. Walking up to one of the walls to inspect it more closely, he notices something bizarre protruding from the surface, a protuberance shaped like a male member. He pokes it a couple of times before pressing the tip, and immediately hundreds of giggling baby angels burst out from the floor and walls, lingering for just a moment before retreating the way they came, though they leave something behind. Now every wall and every patch of floor is studded with identical little members sticking out. This phase is known as learning. The man sniffs the finger he used to touch the button, lets out a scream of pure terror, and then begins sobbing and pleading for help from anyone who might be listening, receiving nothing but silence in return. Deciding that panic won't get him anywhere, he starts pressing the various buttons one by one to see what happens, and each press drops a completely random object into the room, anything from a tiny toothbrush to an enormous vase. Pressing the same button twice yields the same object, a discovery he tests thoroughly on one particular button until he's buried under a towering pile of chopsticks. His amusement doesn't last long, because pressing the button right next to the chopstick one sends a small card shooting out of the wall and straight into his shins. Crying out in pain, he hits the next button, which promptly transforms into a rear end and passes gas directly into his face. Hours crawl by, and the man has accumulated an enormous, chaotic collection of random objects scattered all around him, and when he absent-mindedly throws a ball against the wall, it ricochets into a button and lands him a plate of sushi. This genuinely excites him since hunger has been gnawing at him for a while, but he quickly realizes he has no soy sauce. He calls out to whoever is keeping him there, gets no answer as usual, and frantically hammers the sushi button until he has a towering stack of rolls in front of him, still without a single drop of sauce. Finding the sushi surprisingly delicious, and the moment he finishes the last piece and reaches for more, a bottle of soy sauce finally appears. In a fit of rage, he shoves the bottle aside and presses a different button, receiving a pair of old-fashioned cardboard glasses. Putting them on, he can suddenly see a baby angel pointing directly at its own member, and the man's face lights up because he thinks he's cracked the mystery. He presses that button with great confidence, but all he gets is a countdown followed by a giant rear end descending from above to pass gas on his head. More hours pass, and he has now read 5 volumes of a manga he finds genuinely captivating. But when he presses the button for the 6th volume, he gets the 7th instead. Frustrated, he tries other buttons and receives the 8th and 9th, but still no 6th, until finally the last button he attempts reveals something far more important. A section of the wall slides aside to expose a hidden door behind it. The man erupts in celebration, but in his excitement he completely loses track of which button opened it. He tries one at random and is startled to see an African tribesman sprint from one wall to the other. The next one dumps water on his head, the third turns out to be the right one, and as the wall swings open he dashes toward it, only for it to slam shut right in his face. His second attempt ends exactly the same way, and that's when he figures out that the door stays open only as long as the member tip is held down. First he tries a runner's crouch, pressing it with his foot, then he swats it with a fly swatter from as far away as possible, hoping the extra distance will buy him more running time. Neither approach works, and neither does tugging it with a jump rope or blasting it with a fan. He tries climbing onto the cart and rolling it after pressing the button, but after several attempts he accepts he simply can't steer it reliably. What he really needs is a way to hold the tip down permanently. He balances the enormous vase on top of it, but the button forces the vase back up every time, so he concludes the vase needs extra weight inside it. He tries the water button first, but no matter how desperately he angles himself, the water only ever falls on him and nowhere else. He then attempts to fill the vase with sushi, but it becomes so impossibly heavy he can't lift it at all, and the neck of the vase is far too narrow for his hand to reach inside. Left with no other option, he painstakingly fishes out piece after piece of sushi with chopsticks until the vase is light enough to carry. He hoists it up and carries it toward the buttons, only to realize partway there that he has lost which button it was again. He sets the vase on the floor, tries a random button, and the African tribesman comes charging out and crashes into the vase, cracking it clean in half. This sends the man completely over the edge. As he screams and flails about, he accidentally presses the right button and in desperation starts piling sushi on top of it, but the little member just pops straight back up through the rice. He tries covering the button with tape, then tape reinforced with a steel plate, but nothing keeps it down. After swallowing some painkillers for the bruises the door has been leaving on his back and taking a much-needed nap, he goes to brush his teeth and presses what he hopes is the water button. It's the wrong one, and instead a rope drops down from the ceiling. His mood instantly lifts because this gives him a brand new idea. He'll hold the door button down, then swing across the room on the rope and make it through before everything closes. When he finally gets to the door on the other side though, he finds it locked. He retreats back just in time to avoid being hit, though the door clips him on the way out regardless, and in pure frustration he kicks the wall, accidentally triggering a button that reveals a floating key suspended in midair. Just like the door, the key vanishes the moment the button pops back up, which means he now has to find a way to keep both the key present and the door open at the same time. First though, he has to locate the button again, because the kick distracted him and he lost it. Studying roughly where his foot landed, he picks a button and gets a dog that bounds out of the wall and barks in his face. The same thing happens with the next button, but the third press is successful. Keeping his eyes and one finger locked on that exact spot, he backs slowly across the room, grabs a piece of sushi fish, and returns to mark the button with it. When he presses it again, the dog comes back out. He finds the correct button a bit faster this time and moves on with his plan. He summons the rope, swings toward the other buttons, but the arc still falls short. As he crashes to the floor, he spots a plunger he'd collected earlier and realizes it's exactly what he needs to push himself farther along the wall. After one failed run, the method clicks, and a combination of swinging on the rope and pushing off with the plunger lets him press the key button, snatch the key out of the air, smack the door button, and land at the exit before it shuts. He jams the key into the lock and turns it fast, but when he pulls the door it doesn't open. There is a second lock near the top requiring a 3-digit code. He scrambles back into the room just as the door closes behind him, and in his fury he hurls the plunger at the far wall, accidentally releasing the African tribesman. As he watches the man stride past, he notices 3 numbers painted across his forehead. That must be the combination. Since time behind the door is limited, the man runs through the entire rope swinging routine 3 separate times, memorizing 1 digit each trip. On the third run he stays at the door, punches in the code, and shoves it open, but it's stiff and he has to push hard, and the panel of wall behind him slides shut while the door is still only halfway open, wedging him in a gap too narrow to squeeze through. The man slides down to the floor and begins to cry, replaying in his mind all the absurd little joys he'd had in that room. The objects, the manga, even the dog. He'd been a prisoner there too, but at least he'd had space and distraction, and now he understands he never appreciated any of it while he had the chance. Then he feels a faint breeze touching his cheek from the left wall. He reaches out and finds a hairline crack running along it, a false panel. He shoves it open and sprints through, emerging into a strange corridor that floats in total darkness on all sides. It feels like he runs for an eternity, and when he finally stumbles into the next room his hair has grown noticeably longer and his pajamas have faded to pale shadows of their original colors. This room is also bare and white, but instead of baby angels the figures here are fully grown ones, who similarly vanish into the walls and leave only their members sticking out as buttons. This phase is known as practice. Meanwhile, in a city somewhere in Mexico, a young boy named Antonio watches his family grow tense because his father, a wrestler who goes by the name Escargot Man, has been unusually quiet and withdrawn. His wife suspects it might have something to do with his next opponent being considerably younger. Escargot Man is collected by his daughter's sister Karen in her truck, and she drives him to the wrestling arena so he can arrive early, change into his gear, and pray to the Virgin before the match. Back at school, Antonio is being mocked by his classmates for supporting Escargot Man, who they dismiss as a pathetic has-been. As match time approaches, Karen swings by again to pick up Antonio and their grandfather and drives them to the venue. She drops them off and leaves, and the two of them find a couple of the last remaining seats just as the show is about to begin. The first team to enter the ring is the Northern Tough Ones, made up of Super Demon and Tequila Joe. Then Escargot Man and his partner Silver Eagle come in under the team name Kiss Me a Lot. Silver Eagle opens for his team with a brilliant start, but he's soon overwhelmed when the Northern Tough Ones stop playing fair and attack him together. They keep gesturing impatiently at Escargot Man. Escargot Man tags in but is quickly overpowered as well, and just as his opponent winds up to hit him with a chair the man in the mysterious room presses one of the member buttons and Escargot Man's neck shoots out to an impossible length, his head swinging around and knocking both opponents clean off their feet. Nothing further happens in the room, which puzzles the man, so he keeps pressing the same button and Escargot Man's neck keeps extending, knocking out Silver Eagle, the referee, Antonio, and somehow even the bell. Seeing no useful results, the man begins cycling through other buttons. One sends a burst of flame shooting from the mouth of a metal band singer above his crowd at a concert in Los Angeles. Another causes a Russian magician's trick to go catastrophically wrong when his assistant fails to disappear, and a third makes a man in China bark at his own dogs. The man is on the verge of giving up entirely when he notices light filtering down from somewhere above and realizes that unlike the previous rooms, this one has no ceiling. He can see angels drifting around far overhead in the open dark. He decides to try something completely different. Instead of pressing the buttons, he's going to use them as handholds and climb. It works perfectly, and every time he grips a button with his hands or steps on one with his feet, something remarkable happens somewhere on Earth. Flowers burst into bloom. An elephant draws its last breath. The higher he climbs, the more complex and layered the effects become, touching not just nature but all of humanity, small things and enormous ones alike. A piece of toast popping up and a rocket touching down on the moon. By the time he reaches the top, his hair and beard have grown wild and long, and he discovers he no longer needs to hold on at all. He can float freely, just like the angels around him. Drawing on everything he learned and felt and endured in the rooms below, he embraces his role and begins choosing what happens in the world with deliberate intention rather than random pressing. When he is finished, the walls around him have dissolved into soft drifting feathers, and he steps through a glowing portal that carries him into the final room. This last space has the continents of the world mapped across its walls, and at the center stands one enormous member button that the man reaches out to press. This is the phase's future.